Number 4, a holiday release. Oh, come on. How in the world are you going to tell me that a holiday release is going to be bad in terms of sales for Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon? On November 17th, 2017, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon will be released. As it has been every time they come out with a game, usually somewhere right around the holidays or right before the holidays, a few months prior to the holidays, a new Pokemon game comes out because that's normally when Game Freak releases the game. So let's see. What do they got to say? Well, having a holiday release in and of itself is not a bad thing. Oh, it's not. Most Pokemon games release around that time anyways. No kidding. It could serve to harm Game Freak rather than help them this time around, understanding that Nintendo fans are craving new Switch games at the moment. There are only a handful of titles to sink our teeth into at the moment, so there is a lot of excitement for upcoming games, especially Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario Odyssey will be releasing in November, the same month as Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. These games will be competing with each other in terms of sales, and I guarantee that Mario will win out in the end. If it was a Switch game, Game Freak could release it on a different month and their sales wouldn't take a hit. Yeah, that's where you're wrong. Regardless, their sales would take a hit. Why? Because there's not that many Switches versus 3DSs. That is it. That is the only reason they would take a hit. They would take a hit if they released it purely for the Switch. Guarantee it. I could guarantee they would take a huge hit if they released a game on the Switch so soon after the Switch has come out into the holiday season and expecting it to do well because there's not that many freaking Switches out there. How hard is that one to understand? You don't understand anything of the concept of how consoles or anything work. Yes, the Switch is the new hot thing. Yes, everybody's going to want it. Everybody's going to want games for it as well. But at the same time, you also have some cross contamination of fandoms, but not always. Just because you're a fan of Pokemon doesn't necessarily mean you care about Mario. I mean, quite frankly, I myself haven't cared about a new Mario game in years until Super Mario Odyssey came out. But at the same time, I am more likely to buy them both. If I had a Switch, that is. Ha! There we go. I have a 3DS. I've got one 3DS. I've got two 3DSs. Oh, would you look at that? We have two 3DSs. I will more than likely buy Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Why? Because I don't have a Switch. I don't look like I'm going to have a Switch by this holiday. Not to mention it's a few months out from the holiday season as well. It's not going to be hard for one to save up and buy Ultra Sun or Ultra Moon or both if they want to, and then in December go and buy Super Mario Odyssey as well, or the month prior. I don't see that hurting anything, quite frankly, because everybody's going to have 3DSs. They're more likely to buy something for the 3DS versus the Switch because they won't own the Switch. It's that simple. Oh, I don't know how many times I can really reinforce that. Not enough Switches are around and about right now. Duh. It makes sense. Why would you think that they would sell more for a Switch when nobody has a Switch? There are people with Switches, but not enough. They're not going to outsell something for the 3DS. It's as simple as that because there are way more 3DSs out there than the Switch. That's it. They wouldn't take a hit regardless of how they brought it out. No, I'm sorry. They would take a hit if they brought it out for the Switch only, which is why they've got one in the works that won't be out for a year or so. Because then more people can get Switches in anticipation for the new Pokemon game, which probably will push a lot of Switch units. I guarantee right now, as of this video coming out, guarantee at this moment that the second something really big hits like Smash Brothers, Zelda, and Pokemon for the Switch, when those games come out, the sales will hit a bump. A huge bump. People will want the Switch more. They will be going for that Switch specifically for those games, just like myself. I will guarantee eventually getting the Switch, because quite frankly, Super Mario Odyssey does look like it's going to be awesome, which quite frankly is pretty cool considering I hated Galaxies and Galaxies 2. I was not a fan. I own them both, but I sure didn't buy them on release. That definitely didn't happen. I own them, but I'm not too crazy about them. Honestly, I felt like it was a waste of money. I'm glad that I bought them for $19 because they were, whatever their Game of the Year version is on Nintendo. But anyway, I could continue on this and keep reiterating the fact that there's not enough Switches versus 3DSs, which is why why this game will sell better on the 3DS versus the Switch. But nobody's gonna really understand that one, apparently. Reason number 3, marketing for kids. And this is where I like to face plant, palm right in the face and go, what? You're talking about a Pokemon game where they've had an anime where the kid has been 10 for over 20 years because it's marketing towards kids. No freaking duh. They always market towards kids. And they have a lot of older people as well, which is why they like to also try and buff up their competitive scene, as it would, as well as do other things for them and redo older games because the older audience would like to re-pick up the older games with the new stuff. Duh. But anyway, they go in, mostly referring to the first trailer show off in the direct this morning. The trailer itself was for Pokken Tournament. Yes, a majority of that trailer was all about Pokken Tournament. Some older kid was practicing his moves so that he could take on his brother in the end. While that happens, there are a few kids in the background playing Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. This communicates an interesting message from Game Freak. It is no secret that Pokemon games are extremely popular among younger kids. However, there are plenty of adults that are still into the series. Yet by sending this message, it could be evident that Game Freak doesn't intend to make waves among the adult crowd, but instead among the children. Perhaps they feel that young kids will be the only ones really excited for enhanced versions of Sun and Moon. If so, that is a serious problem. Are you serious? Like, serious, because a couple of kids are playing the game, it's suddenly purely just marketing towards them. Of course, then again, I just said, you've got the anime and everything else, and it markets toward kids. Pikachu is the freaking mascot, for crying out loud, which is kid-friendly, and everybody likes Pikachu. Almost everybody. Anyway, that's why Pikachu is the main focus of the whole Pokemon thing. Of course, it's always relegated towards kids. It's their core fan base is coming out of the younger generation. They get into it, they play it, and when they're older. You've got the TCG, the VGC, and you've got the younger ones playing in those tournaments and the older ones playing in those tournaments as well. They've got different divisions for them, like the Masters division for the the older ones and so forth. The game is going to market to everyone. That's why they're rated E, I believe. I would have to pick up my my case and check that out, but I'm pretty sure Pokemon is a rated E game, maybe E10 and up, because you kind of have to read and sort of slightly understand the mechanics a little bit to try and play it. But anyway, yes, they market towards kids. No, that's not a serious problem. Yes, they do things for the older fans as well, and they have in the past and will continue doing so, so quit worrying your pretty little head and stop making assumptions about something you know nothing about yet. You can go ahead and make yourself predictions, what you think, and that's pretty much what this is, but it's all basically based on nothing, because, you know nothing about it yet. Pretty much that's what it all boils down to. You know nothing about it, so here's 15 reasons why it will be bad, but then again, nothing is confirmed or denied, so we can't really say if this is really going to make it terrible or not, because at the same time, you could make 15 reasons why it would be freaking awesome. But hey, let's move on to the next one. We're almost done with this list. We're going to make our way down to number 2. And what is number 2? Well, riding off Sun and Moon's hype, of course, because Sun and Moon ended up being some of the biggest entries into the entire series. Events were held everywhere at GameStop, and people lined up to venture into the Yellow region. There were so many different things done with this series in these games alone that it got people excited for Pokemon again, and reminded them why they started Pokemon in the first place. Alright, let's stop you there. X and Y did the exact same thing. That's the reason I'm back into Pokemon again, is because of X and Y. And then you had your remakes, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, which kept me going. And then then Sun and Moon, of course, that's going to bring in a whole new audience as well, because those of you who missed X and Y are going to see Sun and Moon and go, oh snap, well, let's go play Pokemon again. And then you may discover that Y came in, and then you discover Mega Evolution. Since we didn't get any tutorials in it in Sun and Moon, you may have to go and, you may want to experience how Mega came into a thing, because you suddenly found out that that was a thing somewhere. So you go and get X and Y, or X or Y, one of the two, and start playing through that again, because people came back into the series because of that. I wouldn't call Sun and Moon the biggest, because quite frankly I think X and Y made more of an impact to me than Sun and Moon. Although we got a lot of new things, and I got Rockruff, which is one of my favorites out of Sun and Moon, and I really wish Lycanroc Midday had some tweaking to him so he could be better off competitively, because I really enjoy the Midday form. I hate the Midnight form, but I love the Midday form. But anyway, they continue. I suppose, and thus, right, it is not surprising that Game Freak would start work on Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. They're simply slightly better versions of their best sellers on the 3DS. On a business level, it makes sense. However, the hype and reception of Sun and Moon alone won't be enough to get people excited for new titles. The game needs to be different and well crafted. Yeah, again, we're going to follow their normal thing, what they normally do, their formula of how they do things. We get a game that is either a remake or an enhancement of the previous game, and then we get a brand new game that everybody gets hyped for and comes in, and we get new people into the series, and we bring back old ones. That's how it goes. That's how it goes. This is game 2, therefore it's going to be a remake or a redone enhanced version of the previous one, followed by the next one in a few years, which is then going to be your completely brand new game that everybody's looking forward to. That's how it works. That's how they do it. It's how they've been doing it for the past few years. So to expect them to do something different is kind of ridiculous. They're going to continue on the same formula that they've been doing. They're going to release another game in the meantime to sell a little bit of copies here and there so they can continue working on their big project, which right now really does look like it's going to be a Switch game. So let's go on to the very last point of this terrible article on how bad Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon will be. And on to the number 1 spot of why Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon will be utterly terrible, and that is nothing new. So, they go on with, all these complaints present the biggest problem with Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. There's nothing, or not anything, new, based on what we know, which is literally nothing. Who freaking knew? Anyway, this is a painful reality considering how much effort went into making Sun and Moon the most unique entries in the series. It seems that Game Freak will simply try to capitalize on the success by continuing their trend of releasing enhanced versions of the game. No, wait a second. Apparently you've known that this is a trend, yet you have harped on how horrible this trend, or how horrible it is, knowing that it is a normal trend for them to do. And that they going on their normal trend is somehow inherently horribly a horrible idea. Really? Seriously? You're an idiot. You know that? You're a complete and utter idiot. You knew it was a trend, and instead of making that a main point throughout this, the trend needs to stop or something, which would take out so many of these 15 points and chuck them into a trash can, because you would have to then repeat the trend needs to change point over and over again. Yeah, wait until the very bottom and then talk about, well, it's just a painful reality that it's a trend, that they tend to do this. Really? Seriously? Ugh. Anyway, they continue. The series has been around for about 2 decades now. People who've played since the beginning are beginning to notice that the series is turning into another franchise like Call of Duty or Assassin's Creed. Granted, the games are still well polished, but there isn't anything imagination. There isn't any imagination put into Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. If Game Freak wants to sell more games, they need to start listening to their fans and throw their history out the door. So point number 1 could have taken out several other points in this article and just not even had them in there if they wanted to talk about this to begin with, because I've also talked about how it's a trend. Freaking duh. How did you not see this one coming? It's got like one of 2 options in their trend. So let's see. Let's go. They started out with red and blue. Came out with yellow. Gold and silver had crystal. Ruby and sapphire had emerald. Which then started the trend of remakes. Fire red and leaf green, which are remakes of red, blue, and green. And for those of you who don't know, green is the Japanese version of blue. They didn't get blue. I think they got red and green. Or maybe it was green and blue. Anyway, I don't remember. Point is, it's a remake. That was on the Game Boy Advance. And then you had the DS, which had Pearl and Diamond, which people were expecting to have a remake of right now, a remake of Pearl and Diamond. Following that came Platinum, the 3rd game, which is a trend they did eventually stop doing too. They trended 2 games and then a 3rd one in the series. Followed by 2 games and a 3rd one in the series, followed by 2 games and a 3rd one in the series, followed by then a redone version of previous 2 games that were already out. So we've got Platinum, followed by Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which are remakes of Gold and Silver. Followed by, on the DS, with an enhanced engine, slightly, Black and White, which then was followed by Black and White 2. Wait, really? Is that how that's the trend that they went on? And quite frankly, Pearl and Diamond, I own them. Don't remember much about them. Black and White, I own them. Don't know much about them. Heart Gold and Soul Silver, guess what? I own those too. And I know more about them because I really enjoyed Gold and Silver to begin with. And you know what? It was a similar game. There was some differences in it, and it was a remake. And then, for the 3DS, you've got X and Y. And then you had post-game content that was pretty cool. Followed by Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, which were remakes of the Game Boy Advance game, Ruby and Sapphire, and Emerald, which also threw in the post-game of the Delta episode, which was pretty cool. And then from there, we had the Alola games come in, Sun and Moon. So the trend dictates there's going to either A, be a 3rd one in the series, 1 game, or B, 2 new games that are going to complement the first 2 games some way, somehow. That's the trend of what they go on, and then there's usually a bunch of filler things in between as well, like Pokemon trading card game, Pokemon pinball, mystery dungeon, conquest, few other games here and there, and different versions of those that usually also come out. Is their trend. And as it following, like, Call of Duty, I guess, in a way, that might be one way of doing it. They're following the Call of Duty trend. I used to be a fan of Call of Duty, not so much nowadays. The Assassin's Creed is the same game following a different story with similar things from the begin with while adding new stuff to it. I don't see why that's a problem. Why anybody would think that making a new game in a series of games that continues the story or adds a completely new story with using the similar mechanics from the previous game while improving on those mechanics and adding new mechanics is a bad thing is beyond me. Why anybody would think that is. I mean, Call of Duty is still a good game. Yes, they give you new stuff, and the people who play it are going to buy the new one. They're going to get the new stuff, the new things that come with it. They're going to play the story if they're in it for the story, which most people are in it for the multiplayer. While Assassin's Creed is a story-driven game, people are going to go on to continue the story. I mean, the first 3 Assassin's Creed were... pretty sure the story was chronologically in that order, 1, and then continued in 2, and then continued in 3. And then they started making other Assassin's Creed at different time periods, which is pretty dang awesome. And Assassin's Creed Origin, I'm going to have to get back into the Assassin's Creed games just to pick that up and play that, because that looks like it's going to be pretty freaking awesome as well. But yeah, why is the trend bad? Why would that be a reason why it's going to be terrible? With that, you're sitting there saying, well, Soul Silver and Heart Gold was a terrible game because it was nothing new. While somewhere up there you wanted a mechanic out of it to make its way into this game. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire was a horrible game because it continued a trend. Please. I think a lot of people love that. I wish they would bring secret bases back as a mainstay of the series, because that was fun, making the secret bases, inviting people over there, being able to set them up and sort of have your own little pseudo gym going. That was pretty awesome. Hiding your base in some random volcano somewhere like I did, where people were like, oh yeah, you want to come over here and try out my little pseudo gym, you're going to have to go find my base first. Might want to bring Flash with you. I know where it is, but you don't. You're not going to see it without Flash. Those kind of things were fun. I enjoyed that. And a lot of other people did as well. To sit there and say the game's going to be horrible just because it's a trend, yeah, that's not going to cut it for me. You're going to have to do better than this. Again, this was totally a clickbait article that wanted me to click it just so they can get the little ad pop-ups or whatnot and make a little money off of it, I guess. But other than that, the list is really not well thought out, considering it came out hours after we got the information of it. But yeah, what do you think? Is Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon going to be terrible for these 15 reasons? Do you think there are other reasons? Because I'm pretty sure I can think of my own reasons to why Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon might be terrible. Some of these reasons are somewhat valid in a way, like for instance, I guess continuing a trend, but then again, at the same time, it's sort of a dub moment. What were you expecting? You expected them to come out with something completely different right after Sun and Moon? No, you're going to have to give them a bit, and everybody's been wanting something new to sink their teeth into to begin with. So yeah, you got Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Get over it. But anyway, again, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. Do you think that there's other reasons why it's going to be bad, or do you think it might be actually really good? Let me know. I want to know your thoughts. Till then, talk to you later. Bye.